Well, grace to you. This is Dr. Jonathan Alvarado, and you have logged on to the Global Pentecostal Perspectives, and I'm so excited that you are here with us on tonight. It's a tremendous night. It's a great day to be alive. I'm excited. It's a wonderful season of grace and a great opportunity that we have to grow together in grace and in the knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Listen, Global Pentecostal Perspective serves the larger community within the nexus of the church, the academy, and the culture. And you make it possible for us to do so by your consistent viewership, your kind spreading of the word concerning Global Pentecostal Perspectives. And I am grateful for each and every one of you that take time week after week to be with us. We are live. We are live. Some of you all already know the protocol and you're already doing it. I see you on YouTube, Pastor Michael Young and Brother Mario Stripling. So good to see both of you on tonight. Others of you, I see you coming in the stream way in. Let me know that you are on and from where you are viewing, wherever you are, city and state, or your state and nation, wherever you are, let me know where you're viewing Global Pentecostal Perspectives. It's always a privilege to come into your place of viewing, but I want to encourage all of you to respond with affirmative, letting us know geographical revelation. Let us know where you are. Want to know where the viewers of Global Pentecostal Perspectives are viewing the stream on tonight. And so I see a few of you that have come in. I'm grateful. Listen, we're going to talk about something extraordinarily consequential tonight. It's the first part of a two-part, at least a two-part. It might be three parts. I'm working on the third, but there are two parts for sure that are coming to you. On tonight, we're going to talk about how social media saved the church. And on next week, we're going to talk about how social media is killing the church. So I want to encourage you to track with us and to be a part of the conversation, to be a part of the dialogue, and to lend your insights. Pam Johnson, so good to have you on all the way from Reading, Pennsylvania, present and accounted for. Thank you so much. I see YouTube. I don't see my Facebook friends on tonight. Let me make sure that we are not, because, Facebook has become so finicky and so problematic. I want to make sure that all of my Facebook friends are on tonight from Global Pentecostal Perspectives. Make sure that you are weighing in from Facebook. I'm on Facebook now. I see several of you that are on Facebook. I'm looking at you there. I want to make sure that you are weighing in as well. There's Sean Clue there on Facebook. Thank you so much. Facebook and YouTube are the primary outlets for Global Pentecostal Perspectives, and you, our faithful, consistent, supportive viewers, are the ones that make the broadcast not only possible, but you're the ones that make it promotable. You're the ones that share, you're the ones that like, you're the ones that tag, you're the ones that publicize the broadcast in any particular way, and I am grateful to each and every one of you for doing so. All of you know someone that needs to hear more about social media and its engagement. I know this is correct because I get so many inquiries and requests on the week to do tutorials and the like on the social media aspects of what we do as a church, of what we do as a Global Pentecostal Perspective studio. I get so many people wanting to know the tech specs on the things that we're doing and the equipment that we use and the like. And so we're going to talk about those things even now, so that we can further that conversation. That's the part 3 that I'm kind of working on, but we'll see. We'll let the conversation grow organically. Right now, you have a responsibility to weigh in. Good evening, Daryl Harris. Good to see you on tonight. You have a responsibility to weigh in, to let me know. Get your fingers typing, get moving, so that way we'll know that you are here with us on Global Pentecostal Perspectives, because we're tonight going to talk about a very consequential thing. We're going to talk tonight about how social media has saved the church right here on Global Pentecostal Perspective. Welcome, welcome, one and all. And as you can see, I have a special guest in here with me on tonight. Good evening, Minister Juanita Butler. Good evening, Pastor Evan Simmons. Good evening, one grace to each and every one of you. I've got a special guest with me on tonight to help me think through and dialogue and converse about this consequential topic, this important matter of our contemporary existence and ecclesial life together. And that is how social media has saved the church. And in the person of Pastor Dante Long, who's on with us on tonight. Pastor Long is the senior pastor of Seed Planters Ministry, and he's also the president of Essence Consulting, a media ministry consultation and financing consultation firm, a kind of a clearinghouse wholesale consulting firm. And he's also a former student, now colleague and friend, and grateful to the Lord for his presence on tonight and at the last minute coming in here to hang out with Dr. Alvarado. And I'm grateful. Thank you, Pastor, for being here with us on tonight.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine, Bishop. How are you tonight?
I'm grateful to be alive, glad to be in the stream with you on tonight, and glad to have so many of our friends that are weighing in. And I'm looking forward to even more of you. Let me know. Not enough of you have weighed in as of yet to let me know. We're only 7 minutes in. So I want to encourage everybody to like, share, tag, subscribe, all of the necessary things that we do in order to publicize the broadcast. I would that you would. I'm making the ask on the front end that you would do so. I usually say, if you're deriving any value from the conversation on tonight, like, share, and subscribe. I'm making the ask on the front end. I'm making a withdrawal before I make a deposit. But tonight, I know that the topic in and of itself has intrigued and encouraged some of you all to be on with us. So do me this kind favor and weigh in. Let me know from where you are viewing. Pastor Michael Young is reaching out to you on tonight, Pastor Dante. Wanting to greet you in Jesus' name. Jennifer Howard, good to see you on tonight. Thank you for being on with us as well. What a joy having you in the stream studio on tonight with us. And others of you want you to weigh in with your thoughts, your insights, your comments, your questions, your particular insights. And really, it makes for a great broadcast when it's dialogical, when it's conversive, and when we have the opportunity to engage with not only one another, but with the streaming audience that's with us on tonight. So please, ma'am, please, sir, make it your priority to like and share, tag and subscribe. Let somebody know that Dr. Alvarado is on with Pastor Dante Long, and they are talking about how social media saved the church. All right. All right, I want to start off with an opening salvo, and then I'm going to invite you to make comments and provide greetings and say whatever it is you want to say along that wise as we begin this dialogue. And that is to say, we are experiencing now in 2022, all the way from March of 2020 to present, a communications revolution, the likes of which the church has not seen, in my estimation, since the invention of the Gutenberg printing press, which obviously catalyzed the Protestant Reformation. We have not seen this kind of revolution in communications since movable type. So 1511, Gutenberg printing press is invented. 1517, the Protestant Reformation begins with the posting of Martin Luther's 95 Theses on the gates of the church at Wittenberg in Germany. And this is possible because of movable type, the technology that advanced, that had the technological advances that made it possible for them to have mass printing. So now this critique of the church is gone out in mass and in the vernacular of the people, because now by the 1500s, 16th century, there's growing literacy, and there are persons certainly of the ranking and file, certainly of the clergy rank that are able to read. So he's posting this on local churches as well as on the cathedral, so that way this message of their dissent and their critique of the Catholic Church is now widely publicized. this type of communications revolution influenced theology. Thus, my thesis is that technology always influences theology. So now with movable type, with the Bible being presented and mass reproduced, with other books being reproduced, with that increases the literacy rate of the people, and now people can read and thus interpret. They begin interpretive efforts and exercises, and now this influences the theology. We fast forward to 2022, or 1990s, the advent of the internet, the globalization of society, high-speed access to everything and everybody. And now we have, again, a theological movement afoot that is the result of a technological advancement and technological revolution. But we have not seen this kind of not just technology, but now communications revolution. In light of the fact that churches have not been able to gather physically, we're just now beginning that in larger numbers. Social media platforms that were developed in the late 90s and early 2000s, in my estimation, have saved the church by their ability, by providing churches and individuals the ability to have platforms that are so public that at the very least, the message and the connectivity via the internet can be maintained. That is my framework around which I have some ideas. I'm going to stop and let you talk and say everything you want to say and give honor to whoever you want to give honor to, and say something about your wife and children and all that. Anything you want to say at that point. But I want to frame our discussion in that notion, in the thought of a communications revolution.
Sure. And again, Bishop Alvarado, I am giving deference to you, and thank you so very much for this opportunity. Tonight, you have given us a historical framework to look at what we're discussing tonight, and I believe that as we really unpack this multi-hundred-year evolution,
Right.
that hopefully we'll understand that, believe it or not, history really repeats itself. It just uses new people, new characters, and new technology, right?
I hear you. Interesting.
Yeah. Shout out to my lovely wife, Dr. Michelle Horton Long, who I have not laid eyes on in 24 hours. But babe, I love you. My three boys who are the Longfellows, Chandler, Chase, and Chad. Daddy loves you. As soon as this is over, I'm not rushing it, but I've got to get some quality time before we minister in 2 services tomorrow. So
Amen.
let's get off and running with this, Bishop, if we can.
Sure. By all means. So I think that you have very consistently, contiguously connected both the repetition of historical events with vis-a-vis the Gutenberg printing press, and now the technological revolution that we're experiencing today, and the ability for people to be able to have platforms and broadcast the communication effort of their church and their ministry and the like in public ways. I think that one of the things that the church has been saved in is the fact that prior to this revolution, television, and prior to that, radio were media by which the church were publicized and broadcasted and sent out their message. Now, the challenge for that has been, and this is a part of that historical groundwork, the church has always been the last one to adopt. The church has always moved slowly on those things.
Yeah.
Radio, television, the internet. Well, Bishop, you're extolling these virtues by saying that, it was the salvation of the church. Yeah, but it was a forced salvation. Because here's the truth. The same cats in the 50s that were talking about churches for being on the radio, saying that's the devil's space, are the same cats that in the 70s, with 60s was Rex Humbard, 70s with 60s and 70s, 60s with Rex Humbard, with Oral Roberts, some A.A. Allen stuff, but not much of his.
Don't forget
But
Kenneth Hagin. Kenneth Hagin.
Yeah, but they come into the picture by the 1970s. By
Right.
the 70s, the Hagins, late 70s, Fred Price, and others begin to take over these television airways. You see the advent of Jim Baker and Heritage USA that becomes CBN, Pat Robertson and the like, and you see Paul and Jan Crouch, TBN, all of this emerges. But the church is late to the game. The Saints in the early 70s didn't even want to admit, late 60s, early 70s, they didn't want to admit they had a television. They call it, particularly Pentecostal saints. You're going to get to that one-eyed devil. Don't bring that one-eyed devil into your house. You spend all your time watching that television. All that kind of stuff. So I think it's extremely important that we understand that we have resisted the technological revolutions and the technology that has put us in place. And even in the 21st century, you have pastors, even to this day, that were not on social media, that did not have platforms prepared when the pandemic hit, that shut everybody down. What are your thoughts about the seeming chasm between the contemporary church, and perhaps we should narrow it to the Pentecostal church, and social media or technology in general, and perhaps social media specifically? Why does this chasm exist? What is our aversion to it? What are some of the reasons, good or bad, that we keep off of these kind of platforms, or have traditionally kept off of these platforms?
Great question. Let's travel back to the 60s and 70s when you talk about the radio ministry that really opened mainstream evangelical gospel ministry to the masses, when we saw the great revivals and so forth. Well, people are going to say, well, Dante Long, you're always going to run to the money since you deal with finance. A lot of our mainline classical Pentecostal churches could not economically afford to be on these platforms, quite candidly.
Wow. I hear that.
And so it really separated us. Not that we didn't have the desire to do it. And then when some of us began to start taking advantage of this by about the mid 80s and 90s, by that time, those ministries that had done radio primarily had evolved to television. And now, in my opinion, this really created a larger gap, because most of our churches were not familiar with mixing mainstream Pentecostalism and a television or a video camera, if you will. And so it was really foreign to us. There were only a small percentage, particularly here in Atlanta. I can think of really maybe only 3 in mainline Pentecostal churches that had television broadcasts. And by the time the early 2000s, and when that real boom of the mid 2000s took place, then we see an enclave of churches taking advantage of both radio and television. And then when it was that we began to see the internet avail a brand new perspectives on how we could take the ministry to the masses, because all of us thought that the paradigm of using television, we were going to get into all the world, right? You heard a lot of those mainstream evangelists, I'm taking the gospel all over the world. Well, we later found out that's not even possible.
Yeah. Some of us knew. Some of us didn't later find out. Some of us who've been missionaries know ain't no television in 2/3 of the planet.
In 2/3
And
of
right
the planet.
now, 1/3 of the planet doesn't have the internet. So I mean, let's be realistic about that. I hear you. I hear what you're saying, though.
Absolutely. And so, when you get to looking at the mid 2000s and the late 2000s, when social media came into existence, I'll never forget, I opened my Facebook account there on the campus in the library at Beulah Heights Bible College at the time, where you were my professor and the dean of the chapel at that point. And we had no idea. We literally were college students, just thinking that this was another way for us to network to other college campuses. But, just a few years later, when they introduced to us that you could go live from your cell phone, we really thought, okay, now we can really do it. And by that time, I was launching a church, and I'll never forget, I was using my cell phone to really gain exposure, because, to be quite candid, I still did not have the economic position to get on local television, national syndication television. By that time, many people had moved away from listening to radios in their cars and were listening to MP3s, and had was starting to see CDs move out of the way. But here again, and to that point, a lot of us didn't even have the technology to mass produce compact disc, right? We were still using audio cassettes and selling those, trying to get our message out. And so, but fast forward again about 10 or 15 years, it was that we finally saw that there was that if I could say it this way, that the divide was being narrowed. It was narrowing by the year, by the month, by the week, by the day. And it allowed us to really get the message out to as many people as we possibly could at one time.
I hear you. Interesting. And some of the interesting things about all of that to me have to do with the fact that to a large degree, I hear you saying there were economic barriers, but
Right.
do you think that dispositionally we were predisposed to being in those spaces? Because here's the curious thing. The data would support some of your conclusion in that streaming faith began in 2000.
Right.
Facebook didn't begin until 2004.
Right.
YouTube didn't begin until 2003. So, I mean, the faith community was already investing itself in that, or at least the innovators were. But what my contention is that the vast majority of people were not interested in, and sometimes some even resistant to and adversarial to, the idea of putting a faith-based broadcast in this space called the internet, when we were just getting acclimated in very real ways to television ministry and fully invested and involved along that wise. So what I'm hearing you to say, it's more, in your estimation, it was more economic, and I heard you say informationally oriented. We just didn't know the ins and outs of doing that and the economics to be able to support that.
Yeah, and again, I always want to say personnel as well. A lot of the churches, traditional churches, had the personnel because they had already integrated the technology of radio production and television production.
I hear
So
you.
for them, it was really just a understanding of how some of the dynamics of some of the social media platforms. It was a real easy, seamless is the word I want to use here. It was very seamless for them to migrate over to social media. But for us, most of us had only been privileged to just barely using a cell phone, right? And so, in the first part of this conversation, I just want to talk about it. Really, just provided us a new avenue at low cost, and I think that's when you saw so many churches and so many people, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes as well, just pulling out that cell phone and going live.
Right.
And that was really the introduction. And from like 2010 on up until 2014, 2015, everyone would just pull out that cell phone and go live. It was really no rhyme or reason. You can have one person over on this side, that side, in the back, in the front, and you just be searching to see who had the best angle, if you possibly could.
I hear you.
But then when we were faced with something that we'd never seen before, which you and I know is the pandemic, it really changed the game, if you will. If I could use that colloquialism, it changed the game. I think now it forced us to say to ourselves, even if we don't like it, and I'll rewind just a few seconds. I remember when they told us don't use the cell phone inside of the church. It was it was distracting. It had no place being in a holy space, if you will, because they were afraid we were going to use the phone to make calls, text message, and do other things.
Be distracted and
absolutely,
all of those things. Yeah.
And then I remember when we introduced online giving, and there was a whole thing about, well, how do we know if it's secure? If it is, the first generation of technology, things like PayPal and other little things that we had back then, independent giving platforms. And I'll go back and talk about streaming faith. It was such a privatized network,
It
right?
was, and it was a paid network.
Yes, 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 yes. And shout out to Dr. Rodney Sampson, who pioneered that, because he did a phenomenal job of allowing
Absolutely.
so many churches across the country to
Right here in
gain,
Atlanta.
and right here right here in Atlanta. All of them, all of you all, if I can say it like that, were on that one platform. And those of us getting ready to go to church, we had sort of moved away from the television broadcast, and we're watching live there on the streaming faith. But as that began to sort of phase out, and again, we saw everybody sort of leveling the playing field with a mobile device. It really said to us, okay, now I think we can really, really capture uh, the church at that point. And I'm going to use this word again, just capturing. It was just for us to introduce to the world that we exist. Some of us had missed ever securing a domain for a website. Some of us at that
Right.
point didn't even have a church Facebook page. I remember doing seminars and people were saying, well, why do we need to do a church? If this sister, this brother's going live, why do we need to do it? And I was saying to them, well, you really want to have like a centralized presentation for those that will watch. Everybody must remember, Facebook is what we call a gated community. And at that time, so many people were thinking, well, YouTube is just too expensive. Like, everybody's on YouTube. What would make somebody want to sit here and watch me teach or preach or expound or sing or whatever, when people can be watching tutorials on, how to make their life better, or watching something to bring them entertainment? And when it was that the pandemic hit, it really caused us to stop and have a necessary conversation, a necessary and more so necessary, essential conversation.
Sure. Evan Simmons, your classmate and colleague, said social media saved the church by giving space for the vast majority to have access via mobile devices, as ministry platforms such as streaming faith through third party were not widely known and were being, to a great degree, abandoned because of the cost factor. If
Right.
I can go Facebook Live, at that time, Periscope existed. If
Right.
I could do a Periscope broadcast or Facebook Live, and it was absolutely free, and then I didn't have to pay the subscription to be on some of the and streaming faith was one of them, but there were a couple of other platforms that I'm not privy to them, and I'm not familiar with all of them, but there were a couple of other paid platforms that people were going on to be able to broadcast and encourage people to go to those particular spots to be able to see them, to be able to participate in their seasons of worship. I think the thing for me that I'm intrigued by, not only the chronology of it and how you're describing how it took place, but I'm also intrigued by I'm intrigued not only by the chronology of it, I'm intrigued by the emphases and what was taking place at that time, and your description of how people just wanted to have the opportunity to put it out there. So you have two or three people within a congregation that are just putting it out there on their own social media platforms, and perhaps the church. And mind you, I've, as a leadership consultant and working with churches, I was just floored that in the 2000s, in the mid 2010, 2015, churches that still didn't even have a website, that did not have any digital access. The broader community couldn't gain any digital access to them. And so, this is all the buildup to the big salvific moment when the bottom falls out, as you described, this global pandemic, as we call it. I think, but the buildup to it, I think, is significant because there's these emphases. What were people thinking about? Because the emphasis at YouTube, when YouTube came out, the YouTube slogan was broadcast yourself.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of making your own brand, your own product, your own personality known through their platform. It was free. It was a Google product, and it was the wave of the future. As a matter of fact, owned by Google, it is Google is the number one leading search engine in the world. The number two search engine in the world is YouTube, which is owned by Google. So they have the number one and the number two top two search engines on the planet. Now, there's a difference, because social media, of which YouTube falls into that category, is subdivided in categories because these are searchable topics. So when somebody wants to know about Pentecostalism, hopefully they'll put in a search engine, YouTube or Google, and Global Pentecostal Perspectives will come up somewhere in there when they just put in an inquiry. Whereas Facebook is, as you've said, a gated community. You've got to know an address. You've got to know somebody that lives there if you're going to access their particular thing. So this emphasis becomes an interesting thing, because people that are interested in promoting their church in a discoverable way are selecting platforms that are discovery based.
Right.
People that are have already a particular audience, like the pandemic, or congregation, like the pandemic revealed, are able to put things out on Facebook where they know their members are already plugged into their Facebook page, if they have one, and they should. And we discovered that many, even up to the pandemic, did not have hardly any, if any, social media, and certainly no social media at the technological level that they needed to be able to sustain that. So I'm thinking about this now, these types. Now, you're young and you are involved heavily as a consultant in helping churches develop in these ways. So when you think about the various types of media that exist, as we build up to talking about how social media actually did save the church, which is probably a pretty obvious thing, but I think it's worthy of discussion. What do you say to churches that you're consulting now? So, because there are people that are out here that are listening to this and participating in this stream that need your consultation, that need somebody with a sharp, proleptic, forward-thinking mind to be able to say, this is how you can manage now, and this is how you can manage going forward, who have bridged the gap of saying that the digital space is the devil's space and all that. They've gotten past all that, but they want to know, what can they do and what emphasis or what particularities need to be considered when they're thinking about this stuff that we're talking about on tonight. What do you say to those persons?
Well, I in about 2 years ago, this really arrested me one night while I was trying to get my sufficient 8 hours of sleep. And I clearly felt the impression of God say, Dante Long, I have not given you this insight just for yourself, that you must go out and help. And just as Jesus told Peter, when you've been converted, go back and strengthen your brothers. I start getting on the phone with so many of my colleagues. Hey man, sis, what do you guys have in place? Well, we still going live with the phone. I said, well, no, listen. Now we're in a position.
Describe that to us, please. Going live with the phone. Tell us what that means.
Going live with the phone simply means I go to whatever platform and I hit that go live button. And no matter what environment I'm in, and I want to place a real focus on that. No matter what environment, you're next to me, sneezing, coughing, baby's crying, light bulb just went out, light bulb is flickering, dog is barking. It doesn't matter. I'm going live with the phone, right? I'm going live.
Got you.
That's all it means. And it gives no respect to any of those things or conditions that I just made mention of. And that's why you would see on some of the earlier entries, I go back and look at my first YouTube video. I'm there recording a well-known pastor, and you really couldn't even hear his voice because everybody was cheering and clapping. And I was thinking, oh my God, they're missing what he's saying because everybody's full of joy and so jubilant, right? And I said to myself, okay, it's got to be a better way. It's got to be a better way. And I'm just so glad, as you said, that salvific presentation of the global pandemic caused us to really rethink this in a whole different way. And so fast forward to what I was saying just a moment ago. I began
Pause right there. Pause right there, because when you start talking about your first YouTube video, you know, we're on YouTube, and my videos come up, and we used to do virtual Wednesdays, and it
okay.
was just 20-minute, 25-minute presentation where I would pray for the people, and we did it on a Canon Vixia, which is like a digital camera with an SD card. And we would, hardly no editing to it. And we would just kind of upload it, no thumbnail, no anything that made. So I'm just thinking about all of that dynamic, and it's making me chuckle because of the distance that we've traveled. But then to know the people that with whom I consult and the leadership consultation I provide, in the limited way that I know the technology, I'm probably more advanced than most, but I'm not. That's not my area of expertise. I'm a
Sure.
theologian and a
Sure.
pastor. But the point I'm making is that it's curious and humorous to me, the distance that we've traveled, and then it is saddening and perhaps even a little alarming to me, the number of churches that have such a distance to travel. As a matter of fact, one of our viewers, let's look at this, sad and true concerning churches rejecting technology. My convalescent mother, before she passed, had no real connection
Mm,
to her church because
mm.
we wouldn't utilize social media until the pandemic. And by then, she had gone to glory.
Yeah. No real connection. And I dare say how his saintly mother felt that she could not connect to her local community of faith because of their resistance. And while we think about that, and we say shame on the church, I do want to push back on that a little bit, Bishop, because some of our churches just we still have not had the necessary conversation. We just don't know. And
I
I
hear you.
know that, we say ignorance is bliss, but still, I cannot really demonize a local community of faith, or uh, any body or groups of people that are promoting the gospel, because they have not been exposed to the necessary conversation. That's why I'm glad tonight that Global Pentecostal Perspectives is allowing us to have this conversation, to really frame up the whole presentation piece of why we really need to give more thought and seek consultation as to how we can more efficiently, if I can say it that way, present the gospel of Jesus Christ to the world, to that dear mother, to that woman who's in a rural part and has just received broadband, and her church may not have it, but she has it, or they have it, and I'll never forget. My denomination it sent me in 2016 to Derry, Pennsylvania. Uh, it was the significance of Derry, Pennsylvania is two things. That's where Fred Rogers, who many people know as Mr. Rogers, that
Mm-hmm.
was the town in which he was born. And the founding father of the Church of God in Christ, Bishop C.H. Mason, had passed through Derry, Pennsylvania sometime in the 40s or 50s. No one really seems to remember, but they just remember him passing through there. And our church did not want to lose that church. So they sent me there to do some secular things. But I remember, even in that rural town, which is about 90 miles west of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, at that church, we didn't have broadband. We didn't have high-speed internet. Many of the
Mm,
homes in and around that area. So we did the best we could do. Again, Bishop, the tripod with the phone.
got you.
Because we wanted to go live. We didn't necessarily want to do like you were doing, upload it
Got
later, which I would later find out, sometimes that uploaded with better quality is better than your impulsive just pulling out that phone, whether you're holding it with your hand or you're blessed to go and pick up a cheap tripod with a camera mount, with a phone mount rather. So,
right, right, right.
I still want to just say there may be some mitigating factors to that local community of faith that could not connect with that precious woman of God.
And I know you're right, because even in our Clayton campus, we had to invoke our friend, Commissioner Larry Johnson, who's the DeKalb County Commissioner, had to go to D.C. to be able to be a part of the presidential act that provided digital services to underserved communities, because underserved communities typically pay like our Clayton campus typically pays higher rates, because rates for cellular service, rates for broadband service and the like are based upon credit scores. And typically, because the credit system works against brown and black people, credit scores in our communities are lower, thus we pay higher rates. Yet within those communities, broadband and cellular service is typically less, and we're experiencing that. I had to be new and improved with AT&T about getting fiber optic to I'm a business owner, for practical intensive purposes. Our church, Grace Church International, our Clayton campus, I had to be new and improved. My business office had to show out and let them know, hey, we pay good money for this little slow behind, can't get an upload stream. We don't have enough megabytes per second in upload to be able to sustain a live stream from our Clayton campus. What is this in 2022?
Since you put it out there, I happen to pastor down in McDonough, Georgia, in a less populated area of McDonough. When you hear McDonough, everybody thinks third fastest growing county in the state of Georgia. While that's true, there are still parts of the county that are not as developed as some of those other areas. I have been on the phone nonstop with both AT&T to provide fiber optic, also to Spectrum Communications. I've fought against them enough. I should know their name, but yes. And so really, and me knowing what it takes, the bandwidth and the upload speed and all those components to pull off a good stream, because and I'm sure we're going to talk about this, how social media really evolved and helped the church expand in a greater capacity than really, since the printing press was manufactured. But I just wanted to say that it is just so many factors that so many of our churches, and remember, so many of our local community of faiths are really serving their community that they're in, with some of the services not being afforded to them to really present the gospel like some other ministries, have the ability to do.
Got you. I hear you. And I think that oftentimes when we're removed from that reality because of work or school, when we go there, there's high speed this and there's digital that and there's fiber this and there's light pipe that and there's all this fast, give it to me now access. And perhaps when we're removed from that, we forget that there are communities, entire communities, that are still suffering from what was dubbed early on the digital divide.
Digital divide, yeah.
Digital racism that exists. Oftentimes, listen, Dennis Martin said they were on the phone live because the pandemic caught the church off guard. I think that there's some validity to the church's not being on the front end of that, but I'm also hearing you say that there are mitigating factors for why the church is where the church is in many instances. Pastor Tony is viewing on tonight. Her comment is a powerful one. I had a community leader who stopped me to say that she was hospitalized almost the entire year in 2020, and our church live stream was a lifeline for her as she worshiped with us from her hospital room. And I'd like to suggest my 85-year-old mother, who is bound to my brother's home where she lives with my brother and sister-in-law, and they take care of her. But she just can't, she cannot get out and about. She physically cannot. Rheumatoid arthritis. She's not vaccinated. They live in a very rural area. And if it were not for the fact that our church and Rhema Christian Center in Columbus, Ohio, the church that she attended prior to her disability, had streams and services, she would be destitute of worshiping in the communities that she loves and knows people and is nurtured. And so these kind of testimonies bookend what is that broad gray area in the middle that I hear you articulated. And I'm glad to hear it, Pastor, because part of my challenge is that, I don't think it's an either or proposition. And a lot of the consultants that we talk to are I just left a conference a couple of months ago, not even a couple of months ago, a few weeks ago. And it was really condescending about why churches say, yeah, stop convincing yourself that your people are not on this. And you got to, if you're, and really presented it as if you're not doing it at the level of a TD Jakes or whoever, then you're really not doing anything. And you're missing the call of God, and the mission of God is going back. But I hear you, and to some degree, I feel like Dennis Martin does, that the church was taken off guard and that social media became the safety net. But I'm hearing you deal with that gray area between those bookended places. Go ahead, I'll stop.
Yeah, and let me just say this. Pastor Dennis Martin was one of the main consultants for a lot of the classical Pentecostal churches, particularly the Church of God in Christ, wherein he served as the international president of evangelism for many years. As he was traveling, telling a lot of our churches, we've got to look at this thing and see that we have to make this presentation or we're going to lose, number one, prospective members, those who are actively sitting in our pews. And we were saying this way before the pandemic happened. But
Wow.
I think those of us that were discerning the times and saw what was on the horizon, even if a pandemic were not taking place, so many people, once we were starting to present, and I'm sure we got to talk about this next week if the Lord allows. People just decided, listen, I'd rather take my chances watching online if the quality is or is not there. And then for a lot of people, as you described concerning your mother and my 87-year-old grandfather, and people like that who really saw this as a lifeline, and
Yeah.
it gave them the opportunity, because I remember we pray all the time in our churches, Lord, go out and bring those who are bedridden back into the house of God. And the truth of the matter is, some of our parents and grandparents, they're not coming back to church. They're stricken in age, if you will, and it's unfair for us to believe that they're coming back to church. What does it look like to will your mother out, will my grandfather out, and many others of the saints who are in their 70s and 80s and even 90s, to bring them back into a church when they can stay there under doctor's care or with whomever's in the home and enjoy the ministry of Jesus Christ right there, not only from the comfort of their home, but the essentialness of their home, right? And so I'm really glad that we're talking about this tonight, because we have to really look at this from a global perspective and stop just using the myopic lens of our own context and say to the world at large, listen, our church, we're church at large, the Church of Jesus Christ, we're trying our best, people. There is a small segment of people that are not doing anything because they still believe that people ought to come to church and sit down in our pews. But the majority of us are at least trying in some capacity. Maybe you've made it to production level. Maybe you are still recording and doing some editing, trying to get it to production quality, or maybe you are the one that still has the cell phone. And and I'm not here to cast any aspersion or to place any disdain on anybody for any of those reasonings, right? And so I'm just happy that we're really having this conversation tonight to really shine some light on the fact that it really saved us from a whole generation that we would have lost only because they're guilty of just living too long, right?
And here's the thing, Pastor. You are talking about not losing. Every time we talk about social media, we always talk about losing the younger generation.
Yeah.
But you have flipped that on its head.
Right.
You're talking about losing a generation of people. And my mind went back to before you were born in the mid to early 1980s, early to mid 1980s, when my great Aunt Mattie, who lived into her 80s, was sick and couldn't make it to church. She was a stalwart member of Union Grove Baptist Church. And the only connection that she had to the church, every Sunday, our responsibility was to come by, because we didn't have a tape ministry. We certainly didn't have CDs. We didn't have any of that. And she died in 1986. Our responsibility as a family was to bring her the printed bulletin from church, so that way she could see what hymns were sung, what responsive reading was read, what scriptures were used, who prayed the prayer. Oh, Reverend Ashe was on today. I know Pastor Prahel preached a really great message. So that was the technology that connected her to the church. And now,
and Bishop, can I stop you? Did you take her communion on the first Sunday as well?
Our deacons did in our
Your
church
deacons.
context. Our
I
deacons.
will never forget, if I could trade stories with you real quick. We
Oh,
did the same for those that were in convalescent homes. My father and I, we would take the printed program, we would take the Eucharist and also an audio cassette. My cousin would take the tape recorder and get it as close to the podium as he possibly could, and have our minister, our pastor, preaching, choir singing, and you would play that tape for some of those in the convalescent home, and they would just be so elated. And I often think now that, and I heard this testimony about 2 years ago from one of the convalescent homes there in Henry County, where they take our church, and I really want to talk about this if time will permit. They place it on the big screen, and several dozen of their patients watch our
thank
our,
you,
our
Lord.
ministry. And
Thank you.
that is why I take this social media piece so serious. When you say I flipped it on the
Absolutely.
head, I now keep that at the forefront of my thought. I'm not here for people that will just tune in and say, "Oh, look at his lower thirds. Oh, look at his professional quality. Oh, look at the multi angles that they're using. Man, they have a really good broadcast." No, that's not why I'm doing this. I'm thinking about those people at that convalescent home. I'm thinking about my 87-year-old grandfather who's never made it to my church. He told me throughout the early 2000s. He called me Danny. He said, "Danny, I'm on my way up there." But now, every week, my grandmother can turn on the television, and they watch me there from their living room, and so many others, stories that we don't have time to share. But
Wow.
I really sense that this has really been excuse me, no pun intended, saving grace
Yes,
to
sir.
so many individuals that can now really still feel a part of the local community of faith, where they are. And I'm just so appreciative for this conversation.
I'm just adding consequent voices to what you're testifying to about your own family, my family, Pastor Tony, my bride's family. My mother worshiped via live stream the last 2 years of her life until she passed away last year, and she most certainly did.
Mm.
Pastor Dennis Martin, please forgive me when I did not address you appropriately, and I did not mean any disrespect in any
Sure.
wise. But we came off TV and strictly went to online streaming the last 3 or 4 years before the pandemic.
I
These are
remember I remember being at Bible college. You remember I stayed on campus. I would watch Grace to You was your program, you and Dr. Tony, and I watched Pastor Dennis Martin. You all had two of the best local church programmings on the AIB network. And then I believe
that's
it was
right.
WATC. Both of you all were on both of those television stations. And, I always said, boy, when I grow up in the world, I want to be like Bishop Alvarado, Pastor
Oh,
Dennis
bless
Martin,
your
because
sweet heart.
y'all had really good television ministries at that point.
Thanks be to God.
Yeah.
Thanks be to God. Well, here, Pastor Evan Simmons this really brings us back to pastoral care in the church. And this has prompted my next comment to you that hopefully will spark some things from you. For those who would be limited to our online experience exclusively, our presence in person, phone calls, etc., is still necessary. And perhaps we need to develop a technology ministry that goes from the church to people's homes to make sure that in their homes they have and can operate the technology necessary to be able to engage with the community online. Because
Absolutely.
I would venture to say that there are some that would. For example, my 85-year-old mother is able to engage with our community in online spaces because my 57-year-old brother and his wife are there to be able to make sure the smart TV is on the right channel. She put all these buttons on this remote. I don't know which button I need to put. She don't know how to do that.
Right.
But he'll set up his laptop. He'll set up the smart TV. He'll put her in his chair in the living room and turn on the big screen TV and make
Right.
sure
Right.
because when is Jay's service? That's my nickname, Jay. When is Jay's service start? That kind of thing. So I say that to you to say, Pastor Simmons, this is indeed an opportunity for pastoral care. And perhaps our technology ministry just doesn't need to be inwardly focused, as you have articulated, Pastor Long, in making sure we have all the newest and latest and greatest equipment. Of course, we need it. But at the same time, that doesn't need to be our singular focus. having
Absolutely.
whether you're swiping or doing jump cuts or whether you have multiple angles or whether you have lower thirds or whether you have whatever, whether your sound is mixed separately or however you're doing it, perhaps some of the angle of it needs to be that we need to take it outside of the church to make sure that the recipients of technology, like when you and I are talking in preparation for tonight, you're consulting with your guy. I don't know, Ali, but you did. You picked up the
Yes.
phone and called him. You were
Yes.
like, hey, we got to make this piece happen in this way. So we have the technological resources at our fingertips to make StreamYard or Wirecast or whatever the other
OBS or
OBS and all these
all
different
of the platforms that are out there.
Exactly. We have the technological, at least resources at our fingertips to be able to make that happen. But others, even on the receiving end, at the very basic levels, oftentimes struggle. Now, there are some that purport, but they pay their bills online, but they bank online, but they do. Okay, very well. That may be well and good, but perhaps it's an opportunity for ministry, for us to not only have technology ministry as it pertains to the broadcast of technology, but for the reception of technology, and therein the people receive again the human touch, the phone call, Pastor Evan, the visit to be able to make sure that you can view the broadcast and worship with the community in that space. There's so many, they're flooding, there's comments coming in all over the place. I know you see them. Dr. Ray Mooring said, social media and the pandemic has made us take a look at the church's sacraments. Now you want to turn, Dr. Mooring, you want to turn the conversation theological now. All right. Initially, only the clergy would touch the Eucharist, but during the pandemic, grape juice and crackers was the Eucharist. Well, I wouldn't go that
If
far.
I can say to Dr. Mooring, I did what I reverted back to what most classical Pentecostals were doing. I moved my Eucharist celebration to the evening, right? And I was reaching thousands of individuals, and I would get comments coming on, I don't have grape juice. And I start making theological, I would say things like, I don't care if you have just a glass of tap water, a piece of loaf bread, a graham cracker, whatever you have. Let's take the Lord's body together. And
that's called theological license is what you took. I ain't mad at you.
Yeah,
I mean, you got holy orders. So if your church lets you do it, then that's fine. And for the true, there are entire Pentecostal denominations that take water with the Eucharist because they don't ever want to be, because of our puritanical ethic, we don't want to be touch wine at all. So they use water. And also the scripture that says that the three that bear witness in the heaven, and one of them is the water.
Absolutely.
So I say that to say, that's an interesting thing. And Dr. Mooring is pushing our conversation more theological. I wanted to talk more practical and technological tonight, but thank you, Dr. Mooring, for stretching us in that way. Jonathan Brown, who's always such a wonderful dialogue partner, said, you've spoken of how social media has impacted a small remnant of people, i.e. the aged, the sick, and the shut-in, the convalescent. How does streaming, etc., impact actual fellowship? Perhaps it attenuates it. This is a curious assertion, and I think that it's worthy of conversation in light of the fact that it does. We have talked, Jonathan, from the margins, from the far edges, from the far reaches where technological advancements have reached out. But I think that technology is ultimately a mainstreaming proposition. The idea that we are talking about technology in the way that we're talking about it, in the way that it attenuates to the whole notion of drawing in and mainstreaming, the people. Now, it may or may not have that attenuating effect. I'm wondering if you're asking, is it amplifying it or is it thinning it out? Is it making it less effective?
If you don't mind, Bishop, I hate to cut you off. I want to run back to that story I just gave you about the communion. The communion for us, it really allowed me to see the Lord's body in a whole new arena. As I said, we took it back to Sunday night. This was a time in which a lot of churches, they do their Sunday morning presentation. So here we were at night, taking my wife and I sitting there. People were bringing their families online. We even got correspondence that there was a local juvenile center that was watching. They were passing out liquids and solvents and I was taking time and I was moving slow that night, and I was seeing that really we were reaching a new demographic. That had I printed the best looking flyer and said, "Join me tonight at the Seed Planters Church McDonough," and I always give that address, 4835 Highway 81 East in the city of McDonough, Georgia. Don't forget the zip, 30252. Join us, all that. But what it allowed us to do is to bring so many people from so many different walks of life into this moment. And I will never forget how people were testifying that this was the very first time that they had ever taken communion with a different ethnicity, a
Wow.
different religious tradition, a different time, and with people that they had never met. And so I looked at that, I said, wow, I never in my wildest dreams thought that I would ever be officiating or participating in a leadership role in a global communion celebration of some sort. And I saw it force me to consider, well, maybe everybody doesn't share in the same value. So I had to begin to teach and begin to talk to people about, listen, communion is that piece that gathers us all together, which brings all of us into the family of God, that allows us to share one with another. And throughout the course of that teaching, many people begin to say, listen, I just thought communion was that thing that we do on the first Sunday. Right. And so, not to go too theological with this, and I began to share the scriptures that the Bible says, show me in the Bible where it says you have to do it on this calendar day, and begins to show people that it's just really bringing about unity among the people of the Lord from all faiths, from all traditions, from all walks of life, and that we have a commandment that we do it as often as we possibly can. And
Not
so,
as seldom, as often.
as often. Matter of fact, I'm tempted. I said to a colleague earlier this week, I'm strongly contemplating doing communion tomorrow morning. And somebody's gonna say, but isn't that the fifth Sunday? That's totally oxymoronic to the tradition of why we do this. I'm
Sure.
just saying that we now are seeing really what they saw in the first century. And that's why I said earlier, it's really repeating itself. It's on the axis of showing us to take a global look into to yesterday. And why am I looking into yesterday? Because it's the great teacher of showing me today, preparing me for tomorrow. And
I
I'm
believe
just
that.
saying that it's really engaging so many of us. Now, to Mr. Brown's point, sometimes it does divide us, because we can start seeing individuals that are really and I think about this, even what just happened in Buffalo, New York, just a few days ago. It was said to us that 3 weeks earlier, one of the dear mothers, 76 years old, who passed away, she was here in Atlanta, Georgia, with Bishop Matthew Brown
Mm.
at his service, right? And
Matthew
she
Brown, who is
just
from Buffalo.
Yes, and she watched it. She was with him 3 weeks ago and began to watch it subsequently each week leading up to her untimely death. And she took communion with them on the first Sunday, and that's when she really got back into fellowship with her pastor who had relocated here nearly 10 years prior. I'm just saying that for the most part, I really feel like what is really transpiring in this moment is fellowship that is more authentic than just what our level of appreciation has been historically.
Because when I hear Jonathan raising the question, and it is a great question to raise, how does streaming impact, and he uses the modifier, actual fellowship? Because that has oftentimes been the dividing line. What is virtual fellowship versus actual fellowship? And I think that one of the ways it perhaps attenuates it is the closing remark there, and that is to thin it out or to make it weaker or to diminish it in some way. And I tend to, as a middle-aged man, closer to 60 than 50, I tend to think in those terms, because for me, actual fellowship is bodily fellowship. I'm coming to discover, though, that the growing majority of people under 40 on the planet now don't share my definition of actual fellowship. For them, fellowship is, and then those on the far ends for whom virtual fellowship has become the only means of fellowship, that
Right.
they too have redefined fellowship. And so
Right.
as a thought leader, as a public theologian, as a pastor, I'm having to now reorient my own thinking around what fellowship looks like, around what sacraments will look like. Now, I do believe that the only place that many of the saints are afraid of COVID is the church. They're not afraid of COVID in the mall. They're not afraid of the COVID in the restaurant. They're not afraid of COVID in the movies. They're not afraid of COVID on the airplane. They're not afraid of COVID anywhere else. Only time they get fearful of COVID is when it comes to church. Now, that's a whole nother discussion for a whole nother time. But the question that was raised was about actual fellowship. And I think that's a worthy question to ask. Can digital fellowship, digital sacraments, in whatever iteration or however we define that, can that be, or is that? I was asked today, I performed a wedding prior to coming on the stream, and some of my old friends were asking me as a pastor, you know what are we ever going to go back? Or is it going to be back? I said, no, we'll never. The church will never be the same again.
Never.
The pandemic was the perfect storm sitting on top of this global communications revolution that was just waiting for a global or cosmic event to launch it. And the pandemic launched it. Now the church will never, ever be the same again. And perhaps it was God's grace and God's direction that pushed us in this way to do that which we would never have done on our own. And that is to create alternate spaces for persons to be able to both connect, engage, love, be transparent, grow, and become digital community. And in a very real way. My wife and I were there, we performed the ceremony. There were literally people walking up to us who are with us in social media, who felt like they knew us because of social media. And now they're finally being able in physical spaces to be able to say, we finally get to meet you in person, but I already feel like I know you. Tell your son, Jonathan, congratulations on his graduation. And how's Ariel's program in Ohio? It's eerie, but it's for many persons, it is a reality. Just a comment on the Eucharist thing. Pastor Tony said that it's important. Some traditions take the Eucharist every day. They take
Correct.
Jesus' words very seriously
Correct.
about Eucharist. So I'm jumping subjects, but I think that Minister Juanita Butler's bringing up a good point. This idea of we've experienced people touched from other states by our live stream who have pilgrimaged to our church to be there in person. One of the things that we've tried to teach, Pastor, is if you're going to be a member of our digital campus, then once a year you ought to make pilgrimage to the physical campus. So church anniversary, Easter Sunday, watch night, there's major red letter days. You ought to try to make it to the city to be a part of the physical. And they came for Palm Sunday, and their children participated in the Palm Sunday worship, which the children led. They gave speeches, they gave presentations, artistic presentations, dance and singing and drama and the like. And so members of our digital campus, our digital community, were able to come in and participate physically, and they benefited from that, and so did we. But their mainstay, their lifeline, what saved the church and is keeping them saved, is social media. I want to pause to pass the hat and ask everybody that's deriving any value from this stream on tonight to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, to tag somebody on Facebook, to promote this in some kind of way. I really want to encourage you and adjure you in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ to be supportive of Global Pentecostal Perspectives. Global Pentecostal Perspectives was birthed out of my heart to the broader community. It started off as preparing for worship, a 30-minute online thing I did just for my congregation on Saturday nights in preparation for Sunday worship. Just a devotional time, a connectional time, reaching out, encouraging them to be in the worship on the next morning and worshiping with the community of faith. It grew to having a life of its own that it evolved into Global Pentecostal Perspectives. That was its second iteration. And I say that to you to say it has grown out of my heart and out of my resources. And so as you provide both the audience and engagement the community that surrounds us, the leveraging of your influence with your social media platforms, would you consider also being of financial support so I can continue to bring guests like Pastor Long who have expertise in these areas to be able to help us think differently and help us push the Pentecostal church and the church at large into new spaces? Giving information is on the screen. It'd be fantastic if there were 100 people on tonight that would say, Bishop Alvarado, I want to donate $20 to Global Pentecostal Perspectives and be a blessing, either via Cash App or via PayPal. There's several of you all that have taken on the challenge to be platinum givers. I have resisted the notion of membership on YouTube. I think I may do that next year, but here's the truth. YouTube, I hope I don't get in trouble for telling all our business, but YouTube is 30% of whatever's given. If you join, if I set it up to where people can join as members of Global Pentecostal Perspectives via YouTube, then 30% of what you give goes to YouTube. Now, I'm not opposed to that, but I want to be a good steward of whatever resources are sowed into Global Pentecostal Perspectives. And if just 100 people would donate on tonight, and I'm grateful that you, thank you, my precious bride, others of you that have donated and are donating, will you put it in the stream? It'll encourage other people to donate, to give, to support, and to be a blessing to Global Pentecostal Perspectives. It will be a blessing if you'll do so on tonight in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. So I really want us to think about now as we transition and move, because our time is getting away from us. I can't believe we've been on now over an hour already. But I really would like to talk now about, in specific terms, what I mean when I say social media has been the salvation of the church. I think that in at least three ways, social media has become the salvation of the church. A, it broke us out of a calcified mindset. Thank you so much, Jonathan Brown. Thank you, Minister Juanita Butler. Thank you, Dr. Tony. Thank you, others. Please put it in the stream. Put it in the chat. Publicize. I'm giving. I'm supporting. I'm donating to Global Pentecostal Perspectives. Make sure that you do. It encourages others to do the same. I believe that it broke us out of the kind of calcifying, restrictive ways of understanding and being the church of the Lord Jesus Christ. Number two, I believe that social media obviously gave rise and platform to the persons that, like you have said, only had a cell phone, the only way they could broadcast. And at that time, 3G, not even 4G, 5G, broadband kind of cellular service, data service. No. Just the most modest of kind of promotion of ministry, spread of the gospel. I don't know if it's as evangelistic as it is gathering and connectional. But then the third thing is so firstly, it broke us out of a mold. Secondly, it involved persons that normally could not be involved in ministry just by the way of promoting their broadcast via the technology. And thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, it provides continuity during this pandemic.
Yeah.
That we did not have to shut church down. And that has been the thing that has called me to deeper reflection on the church of the Lord Jesus Christ. The church in perpetuity, the church in continuity. And the one thing on the planet that allowed for the church in continuity, thank you, Sharice Dancy, for your giving, was the fact that we had social media platforms by which the church could maintain in continuity. What say you to these things?
I really think at this point that so many of us saw this pandemic to be what we thought the end. And a lot of people saw it as the mere fact we may never ever go back to church, right?
The end.
The end.
Wow.
And believe it or not, and I'm going to put on my financial hat now, as we begin to see a lot of churches' portfolio, we saw the church doing I dare say, 3 and 4 times better than they had
Wow.
done in previous years, because social media allowed these churches to do more ministry. And a lot of people say, no, that's because them churches were shrewd, just like a lot of those entertainers taking that PPP money. And no, that wasn't what happened. By and large, most churches, because of social media, that were able to promulgate their message to a larger community, it ultimately yielded a return financially that allowed them to expand and do more ministry, right? And a lot of them
Interesting.
used it to do more community outreach, and that's a whole nother conversation. But I will say that I really sense now that many of the churches are just so thankful, including myself, because it allowed our churches to expand in a multiplied capacity. And for that reason, I think that it really caused, and we said this a lot, it really leveled the playing field, right?
That's a great term.
It leveled the playing field because it said to that local church pastor in that small town, wherever he is or she is in the continental United States, you have an opportunity to reach your community in a greater capacity. And this really illuminated some of our spirits to say, wow. So if I just take a little time to expose myself to social media, then I can reach a greater audience, or I can, in many cases, reconnect with those persons who I've not had much fellowship with in years gone by. And so, as we begin to see this play out, a lot of us now saw not only was it the saving grace, it was the bountiful grace that really allowed that starburst of energy and of resources and of capacity to expand. And so, Bishop,
Wow.
I really want to lift that up and say, man, I not only saw it as the saving grace, but it was really a burst of just excitement. Uh, if I could just be very candid with you, again, where I particularly pastor in the context where I am, I'm in a rural part, and it's I don't get the numbers, the bodies in the seats like a lot of other churches. I just be candid with you, but because we have the social media piece, we reach thousands of individuals that write
Hmm.
to us, that send us donations, that send us cards, letters. Just last week, I was telling them about where we're located. We're in a predominantly Caucasian community, and there in that community, black males are not graduating at the rate in which they should. As a matter of fact,
Hmm.
black in a school of over 600, less than 50 in black males were graduating. When I saw this as a catastrophic need, and I began to reach out to school leadership. And I went on about a month ago, and I said to those thousands of people that watch, we want to resource these males, these African American males, and to see them go to college. Last week, we were able to raise several $1,000s, thousands
Hmm.
of dollars to resource those individuals, those black males. We never could have done anything of the like with just the traditional concept of what I historically knew as Sunday morning church, right? I don't
Gotcha.
have the personnel, I don't have the infrastructure, but social media allowed us not just, again, that term you use, saving grace, and I appreciate saving grace. But if I can flip that on its head and say, it really, I saw donations come in by the thousands of dollars, which enabled us to do what we did and to see my local community be affected in a very direct way by the digital community. Boy, it was something to behold. I sat there last week. We were privileged to have the 29th sheriff of Henry County, Reginald Scandrett. When he walked through the door, he said to me, "You look like Bishop Jonathan Alvarado." I
Man.
said to him, I said, "You're talking about my mentor? You're talking about my former professor?" He said, "Yeah, the one that I used to play the drums for in the
That's right.
gospel choir many, many years ago." And to have him there and for him to challenge all of those young men who were on their way to Morehouse and on their way to Kennesaw State and on their way to other higher academic uh, universities, I really began to see, even in my small community, the community that doesn't look like us, this is the same community that vandalized my particular church 4 years ago. begin to
Wow.
be receptive. And I could sit and I couldn't even really gain my composure. I was weeping. My wife said, "Come on, pull yourself together." I said, because now I'm seeing how social media has engaged our church to really promulgate the gospel in an unparalleled way than what we've ever done in days gone by.
Wow. How can people be in contact with you who are going to want to solicit your expertise in your service?
All you have to do, I'm on every social media platform at Dante, Daunta Long, Long. That's at Dante Long, Daunta Long. All you got to do is send me a message. Doesn't matter. I really try to do my very best to respond to as many people. Uh, Bishop, I got to tell you again, to have many of those young men send messages to us and to say, man, we didn't even know who you were. All we got was an invite at some church. We didn't know what kind of church it was. Uh, we just got an invite from the guidance counselor, from the assistant principal. Come show up to church on Sunday. They've got a gift for you. And to have those mothers, that single mother, say to me, "You guys really care about my son. I haven't even heard of you guys. How long have you all been here? Who's the pastor?" She had 1,000 questions. I said, listen. We'll have time to fellowship in the weeks and the months and the years to come. Today, I'm just here to say, thank God social media brought us here. And because now it has enabled us to do it. And so, enough about that. I'm just happy that
What a
social
message.
media has not only been the saving grace, but it has really been the catapults of how we do ministry in these days to come.
Because of social media, the gospel still went forth in spite of the global pandemic. Because of social
Absolutely.
media, live virtual prayer lines and virtual Sunday school and Bible studies. Yeah, it saved the local church. Because of social media, our children's ministry continued in strength and effectiveness during a time when children had to adjust to all changes affecting them due to the pandemic. So it touches all generations. Social media saved us from ourselves and literally forced us to see the areas of ministry that were broken, needed help, and were not doing as well or getting the results we believed. Social media provided opportunities for virtual evangelism, and as you have described, mercy ministry and reaching out to the least, the last, and the lost. I want to say to you all how important and necessary I have come to see, and I hope that you have come to see, how social media has saved the church. How social media has saved the church. Even tonight, here's the truth of the matter. There likely would not be global Pentecostal perspectives if there were not a stronger push, not, as Pastor Long has said, the end of something else, but the catalytic beginning of something that
Correct.
perhaps was catalyzed by the global pandemic, though many of us were already, as we articulated. If you go back on YouTube, I'm not too embarrassed, just a little embarrassed for you to look at my previous, my virtual Wednesdays, and they were looking all Mammy Made and standing out in the library in my office at home and giving a little 15-minute speech, Easter speech on a particular Bible topic, but with no lights and no real. I mean, we thought we was doing something too, but the point that I'm making is that it was, even though some of us were doing it back then, and we were on television for 12 years. We've had radio broadcasts. We were on social media via the live stream, the internet and everything. You could access us in a multiplicity of ways. But the concerted effort to really reinvent the church around social media norms is the new beginning. Pastor Long has turned the ideation on its head. It's not the end of church as we know it. It's the beginning of church as God is calling for it in this hour. And I think that's worthy of not only commendation and conversation, but of activity. Pastor Dante Long is the proprietor of Essence Consulting, LLC, and his corporation will help you, and his expertise and advice can guide you into upping the game, your game, where that's concerned. As we continue to build the networks of people, I've already talked to internally, the very thing I was discussing with you all, I've discussed internally with our sound technician, he's our kind of media consultant, and our video and editor, kind of producer of our commercials and those kind of things, and some of our other experts that have degrees in CTM and cinema and television and promotions, those kind of things. People that have those to pull together that kind of team to be able to provide those services to churches. Because I know pastors that are out there that if they knew to go to Best Buy and buy a $69 tripod that has a phone in, they wouldn't have their wife or their husband sitting on the front row with their hand shaking by the middle of service with even their because I tell people all the time, the camera you need is the camera you have. You can't wait till you get what you need. You got what you got. You got an iPhone 13. You spend $1,100 to have the best technology that's out there, and you could use that. The camera on the iPhone 13 is good enough for you to be able to do the kind of broadcast. I tell you, before you buy a camera or buy a switcher stuff, just get you a ring light and a $20 lavalier mic that plugs into the bottom of your camera. If you improve the quality of your sound and improve your lighting, your broadcast can look like something that really, really has the kind of qualitative look to it, and you don't have to break the bank in doing it. And I
Give me
believe
5 seconds to say this, and get that gimbal if all you have is that cell phone, so that
Absolutely.
when you got it in your hand, it's not shaking. The gimbal will allow you to get up and walk around and provide angles that many of us spend thousands of dollars doing with
Buying
cameras and so
cameras
forth.
with IBIS, with internal stabilization and
Exactly.
OSS lenses and
Exactly.
all that kind of stuff. So I think you're absolutely right, Pastor. I think you're right, and he can guide you in that process. And Essence Consulting. So reach out to him at Dante Long on his social media platforms, and I believe that God will be glorified. Again, I want to thank all of you all that have given. I did not call out some of the names of persons. Daryl Harris, thank you so much for your donation on tonight. Thank you for all of you all that have given along this wise. What a conversation on tonight. Now listen, next week, we're going to talk about, and I haven't asked him, so I don't want to put him on the spot, but I may have Pastor Long back and perhaps one or two others that will talk about how social media is killing the church.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
So we can engage in that level of dialogue as well, all right? And then perhaps a third installment on some very practical ways by which one can improve the nature of their social media offering to the broader public and to the communities that they serve. Like, share, subscribe, tag, and give. I want to invite and encourage you. I'm sure I think I need about 35 more people to give at that level. Now listen, Bishop Alvarado, I absolutely don't have $20 to give. Okay, fine. Just make a donation of some sort. Make a donation that says we appreciate what Global Pentecostal Perspectives brings to the larger public. And if you do, we'll be able to continue to bring the quality ministry, information, and theological nexus between the church, the academy, and the culture right here on Global Pentecostal Perspectives.